Hello, welcome to my latest video, and in this video I'll show you how I painted this landscape in oils. It's of Morden Hall Park in South London, and you just get a glimpse there of the River Wandle, a river that runs from the Thames in central London all the way to Croydon and passes through Morden Hall on the way. I hope you enjoy the video and get something out of it. If you do, it'd be lovely if you could subscribe and hit the notification bell, as well as any comments would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Enjoy the video. As this painting is 80–90% trees, there's not much in the way of preliminary drawing, so I've just got a few lines down to indicate where the main features are, and after that the task is to block in the whole painting in a sort of crude version of the final painting. This can be done in acrylics for speed, or just use the same oils you're going to do the final painting in. Now you see me here doing an extremely crude job of this. I really should spend a bit more care on this, as it does actually save you time later on if you are a little bit more careful at this stage. But I'm always a bit too keen to get onto the final painting. I rush this stage. If you see me doing it again on a future painting, please tell me off in the comments. I really should take more time at this stage. You wouldn't know it from this blocking, but there are quite a few tree trunks and major branches on view, and as I said, I really should have taken the time to put that sort of thing in properly. Now the blocking has sort of been done, all we have to do is paint the whole scene again, but in a bit more detail this time. And with that, I always paint background to foreground, and the furthest thing away is obviously the sky. There's very little sky showing on this painting, so there's no point in putting any great detail in there, so it's just going to be a very simple sky. I'm mixing French ultramarine with titanium white and the tiniest amount of cadmium yellow light hue. This is to warm the sky up, just a tiny amount. But you have to be very sparing here, as you're adding yellow and it will soon turn to green, and no one wants a green sky. As I brush down the board, I keep adding a little bit of titanium white to lighten the blue, as it's always lighter towards the horizon. And then when that's done, it's more splodges of titanium white to indicate, with the help of a blender brush, a little bit of cloud. But I really am keeping this sky very simple. After the sky has thoroughly dried, and with these alkyds, that's about 3 to 4 hours, I start by establishing where some of the darkest areas are and make a start on the overall texture. So using a tree and bush texture brush, I've mixed a very dark bluey green, and I'm stippling the colour all over the tree areas. If you don't have the tree and texture brush, I don't know why I called it a tree and bush texture brush, there you go, an old stiff bristle brush will do just as well. The more mashed up the end, the better. The next stage is to take a fan brush and, using one corner of it, stipple on some of the darker leaves. This is still building up the texture rather than painting the final leaves, and I will go over the trees several times, getting progressively lighter, and as I get lighter I add more yellow to the mix. The darker leaves are far bluer than the highlight leaves. I'm now just taking the opportunity to establish some of the branches and twigs you can see in these background trees, and I'm just using a thinned out, slightly brown version of the leaf green and painting the branches with a rigger brush. With some of the branches established, I'm now back to the fan brush and establishing more leaf texture. It's now time to go in with a small brush and start to paint the leaves individually. I'm being especially careful on the silhouette of the tree, as this is one of the most noticeable parts, so you can take a little bit of extra care here. I'm still choosing a slightly lighter more yellow colour as I work from dark to light. For a painting like this, 90% of the work is going to be painting the individual leaves. I quite like doing this as I find it very relaxing, and I can listen to the radio or something while I do it, and the hours fly by. As I've gone over the tree I'm working on, I'll start again on the same tree but with a lighter, more highlight colour, but each layer you end up doing less leaves, as the earlier darker ones end up the final leaves in the shadow areas, so each pass gets quicker and quicker. I'm getting close to finishing one tree. Yay! Only about 30,000 leaves to go. To finish off this first tree, I'm going in with the lightest highlight, which is a very pale yellow, and this picks out where the full sun hits the leaves. You just get a glimpse of some far off trees that are very pale and in direct sunlight, so I'm just going to take a small brush and spot the leaves of those trees in before painting a bunch of trees that are very similar to the one I've just done. Here's a quick montage of me doing the other trees in this background level. I'm basically going to do everything exactly the same way. If you can find a patch of dry panel in range, it's a good idea to put your little finger on the board to stabilise your hand. If there are no suitable dry patches, you could use an artist mould stick to do the same job, but I don't actually have one of those. I keep considering buying one, or just a strip of wood, because you really need your hand stabilised for doing the tiny leaves. Before I finish the background trees, I will add some of the branches and sticks, then cover some of them up with more leaves. Just below the canopy of these central trees is an area that has deep shadows and parts where the sun really streams through. So I'm making a start on that by using the fan brush in a similar way to the first stage of the tree canopies. I will then keep refining it, let it dry, then place the main trunks of the trees I've just painted. These trunks are very noticeable and a key part of the composition. This central area under the trees really is the main focal point of the painting, so I'm being especially careful to get the patterns of leaves and the way the light is dappled through the area just right, and I will adjust it many times later on through the painting. Now the background and the tree trunks are mostly done, I will go back and adjust things. I'll generally do that over the whole painting several times. I'm going to put in the leaves that are forward of those trunks, and this will aid the illusion of depth. Here I'm just taking an opportunity to make a start on the line of bushes that are just on the water's edge, and the technique's exactly the same as the leaves. On the right hand side, just in front of the line of trees I've been painting, you can just see the edge of a mid tree, and I'm going to paint that in much the same way as the rest of it, starting off with putting in the dark texture. This time I'm going to use a large flat brush, and then I will go over and refine it with a small rigger brush, flattened out into a sort of chisel shape. Here I'm making a start on the right hand foreground tree, and I'm doing that by using the tree and texture brush to put down a dark mottled texture. While I'm waiting for the background to the right hand side tree to dry, I thought it a good time to tackle the water. And this involves picking out the main colours and just crudely put them in place as a starting point, and then you can use a blender brush to merge it together, creating a sort of slightly blurred version of the final result. After that, where you've got a vertical line between two colours, you take a thin brush and draw little horizontal lines from one of the colours, picking say a colour from the left hand side and draw little dashed lines over the join, and then pick the right hand colour and do the same, and then you end up with a kind of wobbly edge between the two to simulate the ripples of the water. The mini waterfall has a sort of glassy appearance, and I'm trying to achieve the effect by painting streaks of light and dark in the shape of the water going over the edge, and then going back over with a brush with no paint on it to blend these streaks together, but being careful not to overblend, as I still want the streaks visible. This foreground part of the water is just like the background. I'm finding the main colours in the reference photograph, replicating them as close as I possibly can, and just splodging them down. You have to be mindful of the fact that reflections in water tend to be slightly darker and slightly less saturated and by that I mean less colour in them than what they're reflecting. The light sort of loses something on the way through the water. The basic process is the same for everything. Start off with a simple, cruder version of the reference photo, and then with subsequent layers slowly refine the detail until you reach the refinement you're after, and that level is entirely up to the artist. Everyone's got their own idea of how much detail they like. Earlier I'd painted the darker colours of this plant on the right, and now that background has dried, I'm picking up on a highlight colour and with a thinned out paint, painting the individual leaves, paying close attention to how they drape and the direction of them. I'm now having a second go at the waterfall, just refining it a little, particularly adding some darks to it to give it some definition. Now the first layer of the lower water area is dried, I'm going back in and painting the smaller ripple shapes, paying close attention to how the ripples are in the reference photo, and it's really just a matter of painting very flat end shapes and intersperse them between each other, a bit like brickwork. Picking a colour you can see in the reference photograph, doing some ripples in that colour, then choosing another colour, doing the same thing, and slowly building it up that way. Now I'm getting back to the main foreground tree on the right, although now I've had a closer look at the reference photograph, it's actually two trees. There's a fuller one behind and a lot of branches with very little leaves in front of that. It looks like the same species of tree, it's just the foreground ones had a harder life. So I'm going to do it in two stages. The first one is to paint the fuller version without thinking about what goes in front of it. While the right hand tree dries, I thought it worth making a preliminary start on the left hand tree using the fan brush technique. This is very quick and puts down a lot of tree-like texture quickly. The last layer on the right hand tree has dried, so I'm now going to go in with a highlight colour. This tree isn't in the sun, so the highlight colour won't be anywhere near as bright as the central trees. I've let the highlight colour dry to tacky, and now I'm putting in the branches of this spindly foreground tree. I'm using two colours, base dark grey brown and a light grey for the highlights where the sun is hitting some of these branches. This time, without waiting for the branches layer to dry, I'm going straight in with the highlight colour of the few leaves that are still attached to those branches. All the time I'm mindful of how the leaves are attached to those branches in a particular pattern that I'm getting from the reference photograph. Be very careful to paint things how they are, not how you think they are. Just putting the leaves in at random could look completely wrong. After looking over the whole area, I've decided to take a slightly lighter highlight colour and just paint the odd leaf here and there to enhance the feeling of roundness to the tree. And now over to the left hand tree where I've picked the highlight colour, or at least the first level of highlight colour, very similar to the middle trees. This side isn't quite as full as the right hand side, so there's a lot of the tree trunk and branches on display, so this side should go quicker. As I'm placing these highlights, I'm keeping a close eye on the reference photo, looking at how the pattern of leaves follow a sort of line where the branches go. It's more obvious when there's less leaves and less branches, so particularly important to match this pattern you see in the reference photo. Get it wrong and it won't look realistic. After the first layer of leaves is putting in all the branches you can see, plus refining the tree trunk, which was only done very crudely before. Very similar to the right hand side, two basic branch and tree trunk colours, the dark grey brown for all the branches in shadow and a paler grey colour for the highlights. While I'm waiting for the highlight leaves and the branches of the left-hand tree to dry, it's a good opportunity to get started. This little bit of land that pokes out into the water is full of grasses and reeds and all sorts of things, and I'm just picking out colours and just generally making a start in putting those in place. Now everything is dry again, I can go over this left-hand tree with its highlight colours where the sun hits these leaves. Getting very close to finishing this painting now, so I'm constantly looking over the whole picture, thinking about which areas need a little touch up here and there. Here I've taken a sky colour and I'm just spotting where you can just see little bits of the sky poking through. You can usually see these little sky holes even in the densest canopy. The little bit of land that's poking out is getting a refinement, which means adding highlights, enhancing the dark areas, just to achieve more contrast and detail. Generally in a painting, things in the foreground should have more contrast than things in the background. This particular painting doesn't have a huge amount of depth, as the furthest thing away, apart from the sky, is the white building you just get a glimpse of, but still there should be a little more contrast in the foreground elements. After living with it for a while, I decided the right hand tree needed a little bit of enhancement in the highlight area, just a touch lighter. The bottom right hand corner just needs a few long grasses added and a general touch up in some areas that stand out as not quite right yet, and we're done. Right, the signature's going on, so it must be finished. The golden rule is once you've put your signature on, you're not allowed to touch it. So I do hope you've enjoyed watching me paint this scene and got some useful information out of it. Please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. And if you check out the links below, you can find links to where you can buy prints of this painting and many others, plus links to my Facebook page and Instagram page where you can get advanced info about what's coming up next. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video. Goodbye.